A black student silently walked into Brooklyn High. His name was Marcus Johnson, and he was here with the hope of completing his senior year in peace, blending invisibly into the crowded hallways of the school. But before Marcus could memorize the locker combination, Austin Mitchell, a white student with cold blue eyes and a heart as cold as ice, decided that Marcus would be the perfect target for bullying. It started with mocking laughs, then malicious whispers, followed by deliberate acts of humiliation in front of everyone. When Austin confidently smiled, thinking he was about to deliver his final performance, the entire school gathered, phones ready to record, waiting for the moment when Marcus would break. But there was one thing none of them knew about Marcus Johnson. He wasn't just a quiet new student from Chicago. They had unknowingly picked a fight with a trained fighter, someone who had spent his entire childhood honing discipline and self-control in his father's boxing gym. And today, Marcus was going to show them all the true meaning of that. Marcus Johnson stood before the large gates of Brooklyn High, silently gazing at the old red brick building, its gray windows reflecting the overcast sky above. He tightened the strap of his backpack, took a deep breath, and tried to shake off the nervousness that was slowly taking over his heart. Marcus had just moved from Chicago, yet another school transfer, the last one before he graduated high school. Stepping off the old yellow bus, Marcus quietly merged with the throng of students pouring into the schoolyard. He deliberately walked slowly, hoping he could blend easily into the bustling, noisy crowd. But no matter how hard he tried, Marcus still felt his presence as a strange highlight amidst the sea of people. The eyes of the students around him immediately focused on Marcus, their gazes betraying a mix of curiosity and suspicion. In a school predominantly filled with white students, Marcus, with his rich coffeed skin and sharp eyes, became an unwelcome point of attention from the very first moments. "Who's that?" A few whispers, loud enough for Marcus to hear, mixed with the giggles of a nearby group of boys. Marcus lowered his head further, trying to avoid the probing eyes, the curious but venomous remarks. This wasn't the first time Marcus had felt this way. In every school he'd been to, the story repeated itself. A new student, different in appearance, skin color, immediately became the center of whispers, gossip, and judgmental stares. Therefore, Marcus had learned the best way to cope: remain silent, keep his head down, and avoid drawing attention. But Brooklyn High had no intention of letting him spend his senior year in peace. As soon as he entered the crowded hallway, Marcus immediately felt the atmosphere shift. The lively chatter gradually gave way to quiet whispers, full of hidden meaning. The crowd slowly parted, creating a narrow path in the middle as though they were welcoming a king. At the end of the hall, a group of boys approached. Leading them was a tall one with perfect, slicked-back blonde hair. His cold, blue eyes swept over everyone as though he controlled everything. It was Austin Mitchell, the wealthy, powerful student who was the center of Brooklyn High and who always considered himself the ruler of the universe. Alongside Austin were his two best friends, Brian and Cole, who were always by his side in every infamous prank. Austin walked up to Marcus, his cold gaze filled with challenge. He smiled slightly, a smile full of mockery and defiance, as though to send a clear message to Marcus. At Brooklyn High, there was only one person who controlled things, and that person was certainly not the new student from Chicago. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that right from this first day, the peaceful life he had longed for had become impossible. Instead, Marcus was keenly aware that he had inadvertently stepped into an unwanted battle, a battle that he didn't know when it would end or if he could keep his composure until the very last moment. Marcus quietly walked toward the light blue locker, trying to unlock it in complete silence, attempting to avoid Austin Mitchell's arrogant, challenging stare. But deep inside, Marcus understood that this was just the beginning of the stormy days ahead at Brooklyn High, a first day he would rather forget in his journey through senior year. Marcus tried to avoid Austin Mitchell's arrogant and challenging gaze, but he knew he had already found himself in the sights of the most powerful figure at Brooklyn High, a name every new student quickly learns to remember. Austin Mitchell wasn't just famous for his wealthy family or striking appearance. He was also known for the invisible power he imposed over the entire school. Tall, with perfectly styled golden blonde hair, Austin always appeared impeccably put together, exuding an air of confidence with every step, every gesture that made others feel overshadowed. His cold, blue eyes always evaluated others with a look that was both mocking and challenging, as if no one was truly worthy of standing on equal ground with him. At Brooklyn High, no one could cross the boundaries Austin had quietly set. Everything had to follow his rules. Austin didn't need to shout orders. His mere presence was enough to make the atmosphere tense. Anyone who went against him quickly learned the consequences behind that calm demeanor and that indifferent smile. Always by Austin's side were his loyal shadows, Brian and Cole. Brian, with his signature auburn hair and sharp gaze, played the role of the observer, collecting every little piece of information in the school. Any rumor or secret would swiftly make its way to Brian's ears, a perfect source of intelligence for Austin to manipulate the situation. Cole, slightly shorter but muscular, was less talkative but acted decisively and effectively. Whenever Austin wanted someone to pay the price, Cole was the first to act and never hesitated. Brian and Cole became Austin's powerful arms, helping him consolidate his power into an impenetrable fortress. But the true power of Austin wasn't just in his wealth or close friends. It also lay in Zach Mitchell, Austin's older brother, number 12, the star of the school football team. Zach was tall, broad-shouldered, calm, but full of authority. Zach's athletic achievements made him a legend at Brooklyn High, and his fame was the perfect armor that protected Austin from any backlash. Whenever Austin stirred up trouble, Zach stood behind him, cold and unbothered, exuding an aura of pressure that made everyone afraid to speak out. Always by Zach's side was Luke Rodriguez, a wiry student with a cunning, mischievous gaze, always eager to cause chaos, just for the thrill of it. Luke wasn't loyal to anyone, but he was always willing to be part of any troublesome scheme, as long as it brought him excitement. For Luke, nothing was more fun than watching others suffer from his pranks. Therefore, Luke's presence next to Austin and Zach made the trio even more frightening and dangerous in the eyes of the entire student body. Austin Mitchell understood that in order to maintain his absolute power, he needed to constantly remind everyone of his position, and the easiest way to do that was to target the new students. Newcomers were always the easiest targets because they weren't familiar with the unwritten rules at Brooklyn High, and Marcus Johnson, with his distinct appearance and mysterious silence, was the perfect victim Austin had chosen. From the very first day Marcus stepped foot at Brooklyn High, Austin had quietly decided to use Marcus as a scapegoat to remind everyone. No matter who came here, they could not break his control. For Austin, Nothing was more important than making sure all the students knew who the true ruler was. And Marcus would soon realize that the following days at Brooklyn High would not be as easy as he had hoped. From the very first moment Austin Mitchell saw Marcus Johnson step into the hallway of Brooklyn High, he silently decided that this quiet black student would be the perfect target for him to reaffirm his absolute power. Marcus's obvious difference, from his dark brown skin to his eyes constantly lowered to avoid any gaze, made him immediately stand out among the sea of white students who were already familiar with the unwritten rules and order of this school. For Austin, who always prided himself on being able to make anyone who entered his domain submit to him, Marcus seemed like an unspoken challenge. A silent declaration of war that Austin couldn't ignore. And as soon as that decision formed in Austin's mind, he immediately looked to his two loyal allies, Brian and Cole, exchanging a brief glance full of meaning. Brian understood instantly, giving a small, cold smirk. Cole, as usual, showed no emotion, but his eyes glinted with a subtle amusement, ready to act when necessary. For Austin and his group of friends, turning a new student into a target was not just an entertainment game. It was a vital ritual, a necessary step in maintaining control at Brooklyn High. Marcus clearly felt that he was being watched with a special scrutiny, an observation that was both curious and full of malice. Despite Marcus' efforts to avoid the stares, walking quickly with his head down through the crowded hallway, he could still hear the snickers, the malicious whispers, sometimes just harmless, sounding words, but enough to leave deep emotional scars. Does anyone know his name? Marcus sounds so country, doesn't it? Maybe he doesn't know how to use a locker. Or maybe Chicago doesn't have lockers like we do. These jabs came every time Marcus walked by. Sometimes loud, sometimes just whispered with provoking tones. But Marcus never responded or reacted because he knew all too well the consequences of showing even a hint of discomfort or resistance. Marcus knew that confronting people like Austin would never end well. Ironically, Marcus's silence only piqued Austin's interest even more. For Austin, who was used to controlling everyone around him, silence and avoidance became the clearest form of provocation. The more Marcus tried to avoid him, the more Austin wanted to prove that no one could escape his presence and power. Austin wanted all the students to understand one simple but crucial thing. Anyone who appeared at Brooklyn High had to submit to him, especially a newcomer who didn't yet know the rules Austin had set. Just days after Marcus arrived at the school, Austin began making his first moves to mark Marcus as a target. At first, it was just harmless pranks, like Brian pretending to accidentally bump into Marcus in the hallway, nearly causing him to drop his books. Or Cole, with his sharp gaze, intentionally slamming the door hard as Marcus passed by, making him stumble and become awkward in front of the students who were watching. Austin always stood at a distance, his cold smile on his face, observing every small reaction from Marcus with calculated curiosity. But Marcus continued to remain silent. It seemed he had decided that no matter what, he would not let himself become prey in Austin and his group's hunt. Marcus just wanted to get through this school year quickly, peacefully, and away from unnecessary attention. He understood all too well what happened when he reacted. It was painful lessons he'd already endured at his previous school. So, Marcus endured and hoped Austin would soon get bored and leave him alone. But Austin never got bored easily. Marcus's constant silence made him feel as though he had been personally insulted. Austin, who was always accustomed to making everyone fear or admire him, could not accept that someone dared to remain so calm and indifferent in his presence. It felt like a deep insult to him, as if his power was being challenged, mocked. And then Austin decided to escalate his game to a more serious level. One afternoon, when Marcus had just finished school and opened his locker to grab his textbooks, he suddenly realized that all his textbooks had vanished. In the empty locker, there was only a small scrap of paper hastily scribbled with a message. "Seems like you don't belong here, Marcus. Maybe you should go back to Chicago." Marcus gripped the scrap of paper tightly, trying to stay calm. But for the first time since arriving at Brooklyn High, Marcus felt a deep, simmering anger rising within him. He knew that Austin and his friends were trying to provoke him, pushing him to react so they could have an excuse to continue bullying him. But Marcus still held back, deciding to continue with his silence. He didn't want his life to be turned upside down again. Still, Marcus understood that this was just the beginning. Austin wouldn't stop at childish pranks like this. For someone as power-hungry and domineering as Austin, Marcus's refusal to submit would only make him more aggressive and reckless than ever before. And in that moment, as Marcus silently stood by the empty locker, he painfully realized that his unwanted battle at Brooklyn High had truly begun. A battle that Marcus never wanted, but couldn't avoid, and he knew sooner or later he would have to face Austin Mitchell directly. Although Marcus tried his best to remain silent and avoid confrontation, his silence only inadvertently fueled Austin Mitchell's anger. The more Marcus acted cold and composed, the more Austin felt provoked and challenged. For someone like Austin, who was always used to being in control, it was unacceptable for a new student from Chicago to ignore him. A few days after Marcus's textbooks disappeared, the actions against him began to spread in a more systematic manner. It was no longer just random bumps in the hallway or harmless whispers. Now Austin, along with Brian and Cole, began launching a completely new campaign, spreading malicious rumors to isolate Marcus from everyone around him. That morning, Marcus walked into school with his usual calm expression, but immediately he sensed something different in the air. The looks of disdain he had received before had now become more obvious, more open. Malicious laughter echoed whenever he passed a group of students. Marcus looked around, trying to keep his face as composed as possible, but inside he couldn't help but wonder what was happening. As he walked down the hallway to his class, Marcus overheard Brian deliberately speaking loudly to a group of boys nearby, enough for Marcus to hear clearly. "Hey, do you guys know why Marcus moved here from Chicago? I heard he caused a big mess at his old school. Got into a fight so bad that someone had to go to the hospital." As soon as the words left his mouth, a wave of whispers exploded. Spreading quickly like a ripple through the hallway, Marcus felt a pang in his chest, but he forced himself to keep his face cold. He knew that if he reacted strongly now, things would only get worse. What he didn't expect was that Austin wouldn't stop at just spreading rumors. Within a single morning, the story of Marcus's imagined past was exaggerated multiple times. Suddenly, Marcus became a dangerous person, a potential threat, making students at the school look at him with fear and distance. The atmosphere around Marcus became so cold that he could clearly feel every prying eye directed at him, as if he were a criminal just released from prison rather than a new student. But it didn't stop there. Every time Marcus entered class, Cole would deliberately clear his throat in a mocking manner and pretend to whisper to Brian, "Be careful. Marcus might go crazy and end up beating up the whole class. These words were always accompanied by the taunting laughter of the students around, creating an invisible torment that Marcus could not avoid. But Marcus never responded. He maintained his cold demeanor, determined not to give Austin and his group the satisfaction of any reaction. Sadly, this only made Austin angrier. Austin, who was used to seeing his victims react by crying, begging, or losing control, was now being challenged by Marcus's calm and composed nature. Austin felt it as a personal insult. He wanted Marcus to be afraid, to see panic on his face, to make everyone witness Marcus's submission to his absolute power. But all he received was a cold, indifferent glance. Austin realized he was losing control of the situation. What bothered him the most was that people around him were starting to talk about how Marcus was too tough, how Austin might fail in his attempt to break this new student. For someone like Austin, who saw dominating the whole school as his only goal, this was not just failure. It was the destruction of his reputation and honor. One afternoon, sitting with Brian and Cole at their usual lunch table, Austin suddenly gritted his teeth, his cold blue eyes flashing with a rare anger. "Who does he think he is? A guy from Chicago thinks he can come here and disrespect us," Austin said in a low, dangerous tone, his hand gripping the stainless steel spoon so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Brian raised an eyebrow and smirked mockingly. "He's just trying to act tough, Austin. But don't worry. No one can hold out forever. He'll break soon enough." Cole coldly nodded, adding decisively, "We just need to keep going until Marcus can't take it anymore." Austin nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on Marcus, sitting quietly at the farthest table in the cafeteria. Austin knew he could not let Marcus continue wearing that calm expression for another day. "Right," Austin muttered, his voice low as though speaking to himself more than to his allies. "I won't stop until he understands who controls this place." Marcus, sitting not far away, could still clearly feel the malicious stares coming from Austin and his friends. But Marcus had decided he would not submit, not let himself fall into the trap of those who sought to assert their power by hurting others. Yet Marcus knew that he was caught in a brutal underground battle, one where every step had to be taken with extreme caution, patience, and most importantly, without losing himself. But Marcus also understood that the real battle at Brooklyn High had only just begun. Although Marcus maintained his cold and composed demeanor in the face of the malicious rumors spread by Austin and his group of friends, his patience and defiance only served as a spark, unintentionally igniting the smoldering anger within Austin Mitchell. Austin, who had always believed that everything at Brooklyn High should be under his absolute control, was now feeling for the first time a sense of powerlessness creeping into his mind. In the past, whenever he targeted a new student, the outcome was always the same. The victim either cried, begged, or lost control in anger. But this time, Marcus Johnson was nothing like anyone Austin had ever encountered. He didn't react, didn't show any discomfort, just silently walked on with a calm and proud expression. To Austin, this was like an unspoken challenge that he could not accept. After several days of failing to provoke a reaction from Marcus, Austin decided to take a more direct and public action to force Marcus to lose his cool in front of all the students. For Austin, this was not just bullying. It was a battle of honor, a war he could not afford to lose. That day during lunch, the cafeteria was crowded with students. The noise of laughter and conversation filled the air, blending with the smell of hot food wafting through the space. Marcus sat alone at a table in the far corner as usual. He chose this spot because it attracted the least attention. Marcus just wanted to finish his meal quickly and leave, avoiding any unnecessary attention. But today was different. Marcus noticed Austin walk into the cafeteria with an overly confident air, followed by Brian and Cole, the two loyal companions who were always by his side. Austin talked loudly as he walked, deliberately trying to draw everyone's attention. He glanced at Marcus with a cold stare, the corner of his mouth twitching into a smug, challenging smile. Marcus didn't shy away from his gaze, but he didn't show any emotion either. His face remained indifferent, as if Austin was just a small detail that wasn't worth noticing in the midst of hundreds of students in the cafeteria. It was this nonchalance that made Austin even angrier and more determined to carry out his plan. With a tray of expensive food in hand consisting of a ham sandwich, fresh salad, and a large glass of fruit juice, Austin walked straight towards Marcus's table. Brian and Cole exchanged subtle glances and a quiet, mocking smile, knowing exactly what was about to happen. Some students began to take notice of this odd movement and turned their heads toward Austin with curious, worried expressions. When Austin approached Marcus, he pretended to be engaged in conversation and then suddenly bumped into the table. In a dramatic move, he intentionally tipped over the glass of fruit juice, spilling it across Marcus's tray, causing the red liquid to splash everywhere, soaking the table and ruining Marcus's freshly bought food. The cafeteria fell into an unusually tense silence. All eyes focused on Marcus and Austin. Everyone held their breath, waiting for an angry reaction from Marcus, who was being openly humiliated in front of them. Austin quickly regained his composure, pretending to be surprised. He shrugged casually and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't see you sitting here." Brian and Cole's mocking laughter immediately followed, but most of the students remained silent, looking at Marcus with a mixture of pity and fear, unsure of how he would react to this tense situation. Marcus slowly placed the spoon in his hand, down and looked up directly into Austin's mocking face. For a brief moment, the cafeteria seemed to freeze, and no one dared to move or speak. Everyone was waiting for Marcus to explode, a burst of anger, an angry remark, or at least some panic or shame. But what Marcus did next surprised everyone. He stood up slowly, incredibly calm. He didn't say a word, just gently took the tray of food, ruined by the spilled juice, walked to the nearby trash can, and threw away the ruined food. Then Marcus returned to his table and carefully wiped the juice off the table with a napkin, meticulously cleaning every spot. Throughout the process, Marcus never looked back at Austin, nor did he show any sign of anger or losing control. He simply acted as if the incident held no value worth his attention. Marcus maintained his pride and self-respect in such an unexpectedly calm manner that it left all the students in the cafeteria, even those who were familiar with Austin's behavior, in shock. It was this coldly composed reaction that made Austin feel a strange sense of unease for the first time. Standing there under the gaze of all the students in the cafeteria, Austin felt as though he was the one who had failed. He wanted to see Marcus angry, wanted to see Marcus lose control, but this new student was handling the situation far better than he ever could. Marcus sat back down at his clean table, continuing to look down at the book in front of him as though nothing had happened. He still didn't say a word. And at that moment, Austin began to realize that Marcus was unlike any victim he had ever encountered. For the first time, Austin Mitchell, the proud ruler of Brooklyn High, understood that he was facing a real opponent, someone who could shake the position and power he had always believed to be absolute. The unusual calm that Marcus displayed during the incident in the cafeteria made Austin feel uneasy for the first time. But little did anyone know that behind that cold composure was a past, full of haunting memories and painful experiences that Marcus always tried to hide. After that tense afternoon, Marcus quietly stepped out of the gates of Brooklyn High, leaving behind the prying eyes and whispers full of surprise mixed with caution. The walk home today seemed longer than usual, each step feeling heavier, as if Marcus was carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. When he reached the door of his house, Marcus stood silently for a few seconds, taking a deep breath, as if preparing himself before stepping inside. Inside the small, simple house, which was eerily quiet, Marcus set his backpack down on the floor, dropped onto the old couch, and closed his eyes. As soon as Marcus closed his eyes, the painful memories of his past rushed back into his mind like a sudden flood, vivid, as if they had just happened yesterday. Marcus had attended a high school in the suburbs of Chicago where he had to face discrimination and bullying from white students, people who couldn't accept the existence of someone different like him. But unlike now, back then, Marcus didn't have the calm or the patience to remain silent in the face of insults. The bully in his old school was Tyler Henderson, a tall white student who was known for his roughness and violence. Tyler would often block Marcus on his way home, throwing cruel insults about his skin color and background. At first, Marcus tried to ignore Tyler, but the more he stayed silent, the more Tyler's provocations escalated. A slow, burning anger began to form inside Marcus, waiting for the day it would explode. That fateful day came on a cold October afternoon. As Marcus stepped out of the school gates, Tyler and his group were already waiting. Tyler stepped forward, a mocking smile curling on his lips. "Hey, Marcus, who do you think you are, walking through here without saying hi to us?" Marcus tried to pass by quickly, but Tyler blocked his way, his eyes filled with provocation. "I'm talking to you, you filthy black!" Those words were like a sharp knife piercing through Marcus's heart, sparking a rage he had never felt before. All the pent-up frustration that had accumulated over the years suddenly erupted violently, and Marcus lost the ability to control himself. In an instant, he charged at Tyler, throwing a powerful punch to his face. But Marcus didn't stop there. His anger, like an uncontrollable monster, drove him further than he had intended. In less than a minute, Tyler was lying motionless on the ground, his face covered in blood. Marcus stood trembling, horrified, as he realized what he had just done. The result of his loss of control was that Tyler had to be hospitalized with serious injuries. Marcus was suspended and had to transfer schools, and his family faced accusations and harsh judgment from the community. The days that followed were some of the most terrifying of Marcus's life. He had promised himself he would never let something like that happen again. Marcus didn't want to become someone who lost control, nor did he want to cause anyone else pain, no matter how badly they treated him. Now, sitting in his small room in Brooklyn, Marcus could feel that old fear rising again. The image of Tyler lying motionless on the ground. The terrified looks of his friends when they witnessed what had happened. Those memories made Marcus shiver with fear. He was afraid that if Austin continued to push him like Tyler had done, history might repeat itself. Marcus understood that he had overcome today's challenge in the cafeteria because of his strong self-control, but he wasn't sure if he would be able to maintain that control if Austin continued to push the situation to its limits. He worried about his ability to control his anger because he knew all too well that once that anger erupted, there would be no way to control it. Sitting silently on the old couch, Marcus suddenly realized he was trembling, his breath heavy. He raised his hand to cover his face, trying to push away the terrifying images invading his mind. Marcus knew that if he wanted to avoid that tragic outcome again, he had to find a better way to cope, a method that would help him maintain his composure and not let Austin push him to the very edge. Marcus remembered what his father had told him when they left Chicago. True strength doesn't lie in the ability to defeat others, but in knowing how to control yourself in the hardest moments. Those words now seemed like the only anchor Marcus had to hold on to in this difficult situation. He took a deep breath, determined to stand up once again and face the new challenges at Brooklyn High with all the willpower he had. Marcus knew that while he couldn't change the past, he could certainly decide how to face the present, ensuring that past horrors would never repeat themselves. Marcus opened his eyes, looked up at the ceiling, and silently promised himself, "I will never let that happen again. Never." But deep down, Marcus couldn't help but tremble because he knew that the real test at Brooklyn High had only just begun. The painful memories from his old school in Chicago continued to haunt Marcus relentlessly, making it impossible for him to sleep, even as night fell. The small room was immersed in the stillness of darkness, only the soft, rhythmic ticking of an old wall clock breaking the silence. Marcus lay still on the bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as if searching for some answer hidden within the tiny cracks in the faded white paint. He didn't want a repeat of what happened with Tyler, but things at Brooklyn High were getting worse by the day. Marcus could clearly feel the pressure weighing heavier on his shoulders each day, like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode at any moment. If Austin continued with his provocations, Marcus wasn't sure if he could stay strong enough to keep his composure. Just then, Marcus heard a faint sound from the living room. The familiar footsteps of his father, James Johnson, softly echoed, pulling Marcus from the swirling thoughts in his mind. Marcus sat up, looked through the door crack, and saw the soft glow of light from the living room. It brought with it a sense of calm and warmth. James Johnson, Marcus's father, who had always been his steady support, had once been a famous boxer, dominating major tournaments for over a decade. But more than his accomplishments in the ring, James was known for his ability to remain calm and composed even in the most tense situations. He was the one who had taught Marcus how to face life's challenges with control and resilience. Marcus stood up, took a deep breath, and walked out of his room. In the living room, James was sitting on the old couch, focused on a book in his hands. When he heard Marcus's footsteps, James looked up, his gaze gentle with a hint of surprise. "Why aren't you asleep yet, Marcus? Is something wrong?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before walking over to sit next to his father. He remained silent for a long time, unsure of how to begin. James set his book down on the table and turned to look at Marcus, his face filled with sincere concern. "If something's bothering you, just talk to me. Don't keep it all to yourself. You know I'm always here to listen." Marcus lowered his gaze to the floor. before finally speaking. His voice was a little shaky, but sincere. "Father, things at the new school aren't going well. There's a student named Austin, and he keeps trying to provoke me. I've tried to endure it, but the more I ignore him, the worse it gets." Marcus hesitated, his voice growing tight as painful memories flooded back. "I'm scared. Scared I'll lose control again like I did back in Chicago. I don't want that to happen again, Father." James listened in silence, his eyes showing deep understanding. He knew exactly what Marcus was facing because he had been through countless similar situations in the ring, where calmness and self-control were the deciding factors between victory and defeat. After a moment of silence, James placed his large hand on Marcus's shoulder, his voice deep and warm. "Marcus, I understand what you're afraid of. I also understand why you want to avoid it. But remember, in the ring, my opponents always try to make me lose my cool. That's their tactic. And in life, people like Austin are the same. They want you to react, to lose control." James paused for a moment, looking into Marcus's eyes with serious intensity. "But son, avoiding it forever isn't the way. Sometimes you have to stand up and face what's happening. But not with your fists or with uncontrolled anger. You have to face it with courage, calmness, and above all, with the ability to control yourself." Marcus looked at his father, feeling every word penetrate deeply into his mind, easing the worries and fears within him. James continued, his tone becoming softer. "I'm not saying you should fight or hurt anyone. What I want is for you to understand the value of self-control. The truly strong are not the ones who can knock someone out, but the ones who can remain calm and control themselves even in the most tense situations." Marcus sat silently, thinking deeply about what his father had just said. James's sincere advice seemed to open a new door for him, helping Marcus see more clearly what he needed to do to face Austin in the difficult situation at Brooklyn High. Seeing Marcus still deep in thought, James gently patted him on the back, smiling encouragingly. "I believe in you, Marcus. Remember, every fight I ever won was because of my calmness and self-control, not because of my muscle or my anger. Show Austin that you're stronger than he thinks, but with a different kind of strength, the strength of self-control." Marcus took a deep breath, and for the first time in many days, he felt lighter and more at peace. He knew his father was right, and now he understood that he could no longer keep avoiding it. Marcus had to stand up to Austin, but not with violence or anger, but with calmness, determination, and a solid will. Marcus looked at his father, his eyes filled with gratitude and resolve. "Thank you, Father. I'll remember everything you said. I promise I'll never let what happened in Chicago happen again. I'll stay calm and keep control of myself." James smiled warmly, nodding in trust. "I believe in you, Marcus. Show Austin how strong you are in a way he never expected." Marcus nodded, feeling a newfound sense of determination and hope. From this moment, he knew he was ready to face the challenge, not as a victim, but as someone who truly controlled himself and his own life. The conversation with his father had helped Marcus regain some balance and confidence in himself. But he knew that the real challenge at Brooklyn High was far from over. And sure enough, not long after, the tension Marcus had anticipated quickly arrived in a way he could never have imagined. The next morning, as Marcus stepped into the hallway of the school, he immediately felt the unusual atmosphere hanging over him. The whispers and gossip from the crowd of students grew louder, their gazes toward him curious yet full of suspicion. Something was happening, Marcus thought. But he kept his calm demeanor, continuing to walk toward his locker as usual. As he approached, Marcus immediately noticed something out of place. A large white sheet of paper was taped right in the center of his locker, so obvious that it couldn't be ignored. Moving closer, Marcus read the hastily scrolled words full of provocation. "Marcus, if you're not a coward, meet me at the sports field after school. I'll be waiting for you. Austin Mitchell." Just seconds after Marcus read the challenge, the mocking laughter and gossip from the students around him grew louder. Marcus stood still, staring at the note once again, as if trying to confirm Austin's real intent. This was no longer just a prank or typical bullying. This was a public challenge, a trap set by Austin to force Marcus into a reaction. If Marcus didn't show up, he would immediately be labeled a coward in front of the entire school. And that was exactly what Austin wanted. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering his father's words from the night before. True strength lies in controlling yourself, even in the most tense situations. Those meaningful words from his father echoed clearly in Marcus's mind, giving him the strength and calm needed to face this challenge. Across the hallway, Austin stood with Brian and Cole, watching Marcus with a self-satisfied look. He smiled faintly, his face showing clear triumph as he saw the crowd staring at Marcus, waiting for his response. Austin knew that Marcus now had two choices: either show up and face him, or forever be disrespected. And no matter which choice Marcus made, Austin was certain he would be the victor in the end. Cole chuckled softly and whispered to Austin, full of mockery, "Bet Marcus won't dare show up. He's just pretending to be tough in front of everyone." Brian joined in, sneering. "Yeah, Austin. He'll humiliate himself if he shows up. Maybe he's shaking in fear right now." Austin nodded slightly, but deep down a small doubt began to surface. Though he didn't want to admit it, the cold, steady demeanor Marcus had shown during the cafeteria incident still unsettled him, making him feel uneasy. Austin had always believed he could control everything. But Marcus wasn't like his previous victims. He was different. And that difference was what made Austin unsure of his plan this time. However, Austin quickly pushed aside this small concern, reassuring himself that everything would soon be under his control. He needed to assert his power at Brooklyn High, and Marcus would be the keep. Marcus stood still in front of his locker, thinking quickly. He knew exactly what Austin wanted to make him lose his composure, to make him afraid and submit. But Marcus had made a decision. He would never let the past repeat itself. He wouldn't lose control, and he wouldn't resort to violence, but he also couldn't keep avoiding and enduring it any longer. Finally, Marcus slowly turned around and walked straight toward Austin, catching the stunned eyes of the students around him. Austin was slightly surprised, but quickly regained his usual challenging smirk, his cold blue eyes staring directly at Marcus, full of provocation. Marcus stood before Austin, his expression calm and confident. He looked Austin in the eyes and spoke clearly, each word slow and deliberate. "I'll be there. I'm not the coward you think I am, Austin. But if you want to prove something, I'll show you what real strength is." Marcus's declaration rang through the hallway, causing an eerie silence as everyone took in his words. No one could believe that Marcus had accepted the challenge so decisively and calmly. Even Austin couldn't hide his surprise, and deep inside, a sense of unease grew stronger than ever. Austin swallowed slightly, but still forced a cold smile. "All right, Marcus. I'll wait and see if you have the guts to face me." Marcus didn't answer further, simply nodding lightly before turning and walking away, leaving behind an Austin who for the first time felt uncertain about his plan. Austin realized he had inadvertently put himself in a difficult position. Marcus was no longer an easy target. He had become a real challenge that Austin had never faced before. Marcus walked out of the hallway, his expression still as determined as ever. Inside, he no longer felt fear, only a strong resolve and unwavering will. He knew that from this moment on, he would never run away again. Marcus would face Austin and any challenge ahead with all the strength of calm and self-control his father had taught him. The real battle at Brooklyn High had only just begun, and Marcus was ready to face it with all his strength and courage. The confidence and calmness Marcus displayed when accepting Austin's challenge stunned the entire Brooklyn High School. But more than anything, it made Austin feel more uneasy than ever, even though Austin tried to mask his discomfort with his usual arrogant demeanor. Deep down, he knew that Marcus was unlike any opponent he had ever faced before. Still, he could not back down. The honor and power Austin had built over the years wouldn't allow him to give up now. That afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the horizon, the sports field behind the school became unusually quiet. The silence was so profound that the soft sound of wind rustling through the trees was clearly audible. This was the place Austin had chosen to force Marcus to show up, hoping it would be where Marcus would fail and he would regain his reputation before all the students in the school. Austin leaned against the fence, arms crossed in front of his chest, his cold gaze fixed on the narrow path leading into the field. Beside him stood Zach Mitchell, his older brother, the captain of the most famous sports team in the school, someone everyone had to be wary of when facing him. Zach was tall, muscular, his defined physique prominent under his sports attire. He stood silently next to his brother, his expression calm, but his eyes were full of threatening power. With them was Luke Rodriguez, a student known for his thug-like behavior and love of causing trouble. Luke was smaller than Zach, but his face always radiated a cunning and reckless aura, making many students in the school wary of him. Luke stood by a nearby streetlight, a smirk on his face, eagerly waiting for Marcus to appear, like a predator anticipating its prey falling into a trap. Austin turned to Zach, his voice cold but resolute. "This time we need to teach Marcus a real lesson. I want everyone to see that no one can defy us." Zach nodded slightly, his eyes unwavering. As the older brother, he always had the responsibility to protect Austin's position, and this time was no different. Luke chuckled, his voice filled with provocation. "Don't worry, Austin. Marcus will regret ever challenging us." Just then, Marcus's figure slowly appeared from the path leading to the field. Marcus walked calmly, his back straight, his eyes fixed directly on Austin and his group without flinching. Instead of reassuring Austin, his composed demeanor only heightened the uneasy feeling within him. Marcus stopped in front of Austin, maintaining a comfortable distance. His voice rang out clearly and calmly. "I'm here. What do you want, Austin?" Austin smirked, stepping forward with his usual confident expression. "You know exactly what I want, Marcus. I want you to understand one thing. Brooklyn High is my territory, and there's no room for people like you here." Marcus stood still, his face showing no signs of anger or fear. Instead, he looked at Austin with a calm and indifferent gaze, making Austin feel as though he himself was the one being challenged. Losing his patience, Austin tilted his chin toward Zach and Luke, signaling for them to act. Zach immediately stepped forward, using his large frame to intimidate Marcus, while Luke circled around behind, aiming to trap Marcus and prevent his escape. But what happened next left them all stunned. As soon as Zach reached out to grab Marcus by the shoulder, Marcus swiftly moved, quickly sidestepping. Zach was stunned, but immediately turned to attack again. This time, Marcus responded with a precise martial arts move. He gently grabbed Zach's wrist, twisted it just enough to throw him off balance, and Zach crashed to the ground, his massive body falling like a heavy rock. At the same moment, Luke rushed forward from behind, attempting to throw a punch at Marcus's back, but Marcus seemed to have anticipated this. He spun around quickly, skillfully, evading the blow, and then grabbed Luke's arm, locking it behind his back with a swift and firm technique. Luke struggled, but he was completely helpless against Marcus's flawless control. Marcus held Luke in the locked position just long enough to demonstrate that he could cause serious injury if he wished, but he chose not to. Then he gently pushed Luke forward, causing him to stumble and fall beside Zach. Both of them stunned beyond belief. Austin stood frozen, mouth agape, his eyes unable to comprehend what had just happened. He couldn't believe that Marcus, the one he had always underestimated, possessed such incredible martial arts skills. Marcus stood there, his expression composed as he looked directly at Austin. His voice, calm, yet filled with inner strength, rang out. "I told you, Austin, I didn't come here to fight or hurt anyone, but if you force me, I won't let myself be bullied." Marcus's composed, clear, and powerful words echoed in the stillness of the field, making Austin feel the overwhelming weight of defeat for the first time in his life. He realized that this time he had completely misjudged his opponent. Austin swallowed nervously, stepping back unconsciously, his heart filled with an unfamiliar sense of unease and fear. Marcus was no longer an easy target. Now Marcus had truly become a challenge that Austin had never anticipated, and Austin understood that from this moment on, the real battle at Brooklyn High had just begun. The stunned silence that enveloped the space behind Brooklyn High, where Marcus had just delivered an unexpected and spectacular display of martial arts, left Zach and Luke in disbelief. Their eyes widened in shock as they realized the strength and skill Marcus had just demonstrated far exceeded anything they had ever imagined. In front of them, Marcus stood firm, his expression completely calm, breathing steady and confident. His eyes locked directly onto Austin, who at that moment remained frozen, a mix of confusion and intense anger on his face. Austin had never felt such a humiliating defeat before. For years, he had maintained absolute control at Brooklyn High. Every challenge, every person who dared defy him had quickly succumbed to his pressure. But now, his arrogance, pride, and self-belief were shattered completely by someone he had underestimated. Marcus had not only easily defeated Zach and Luke, but he had also made Austin look foolish in front of his closest allies. A wave of furious anger began to rise within Austin, slowly overtaking his reason. His hands trembled, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white, his teeth grinding together with the sound of fury. In his mind, there was only one thought left. He had to defeat Marcus at all costs to make him pay for the humiliation he had just suffered. As Marcus remained vigilant with Zach and Luke, Austin suddenly let out an angry yell, charging toward Marcus from behind with all the power and fury building up inside him. "Marcus, you're going to pay!" Austin shouted, his voice echoing in madness, startling both Zach and Luke. They had never seen Austin lose control like this, but Marcus, seemingly prepared for any situation, reacted with surprising speed. As soon as Austin charged at him from behind, Marcus turned calmly and with astonishing accuracy, completely dodging Austin's furious attack. Not stopping there, Marcus executed a martial arts move with incredible precision, but also with great gentleness. He quickly grabbed Austin's right wrist, expertly twisting and pulling his arm behind him, locking it into a secure yet non-harmful position. In the blink of an eye, Austin was completely immobilized, struggling but unable to break free from Marcus's precise control. The way Marcus locked his arm was gentle yet firm, and the more Austin tried to struggle, the more pain and helplessness he felt. Marcus held Austin in that position, his gaze still calm and composed, with no sign of anger or agitation. His voice was soft, yet full of authority as he spoke. "I told you, Austin, I didn't come here to fight or hurt anyone. But if you keep provoking me, you'll only hurt yourself." Austin, now completely losing control of his rationality, screamed desperately, struggling to break free as he yelled, "Let me go, Marcus! Who do you think you are, humiliating me like this? I'll make you regret this for the rest of your life." Marcus held Austin's wrist for just a moment longer, but he made no attempt to hurt him. Instead, he slowly loosened his grip, just enough to make Austin feel that he could regain control if he continued to cause trouble, but not enough to cause any real harm. Marcus leaned down slightly and whispered in Austin's ear, his voice calm but incredibly clear, so only Austin could hear. "Austin! You're humiliating yourself. True power doesn't lie in making others fear or hurt. True power lies in the ability to control yourself in any situation. I hope you understand that." Marcus released Austin's arm gently, causing him to stumble back a few steps before collapsing to the ground, his eyes dazed and full of despair. Austin gasped for air, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, shame, and fear. But above all, there was a sense of shock at the psychological strength and situational control Marcus had just demonstrated, far beyond anything he had ever witnessed. Zach and Luke stood nearby, completely speechless. They couldn't believe their eyes. Austin, who had once made the entire school fear him, was now sitting helplessly on the ground, completely defeated by a new kid who had barely been at Brooklyn High for a short time. In their eyes, Marcus was no longer someone to be mocked. He was now someone to be respected and even feared. Marcus looked down at Austin one last time, his voice resolute but still full of sincerity. "I never wanted this to happen, but you need to understand that I will never accept being bullied or forced into anything. Think carefully about that, Austin." With those words, Marcus quietly turned and walked away, his demeanor calm and composed as if nothing had happened. No one dared to speak. The atmosphere around the sports field became eerily silent. Austin sat frozen on the ground, his eyes filled with panic and confusion like never before. He couldn't comprehend what had just happened, only knowing that for the first time in his life, he had experienced the true strength of someone who could control themselves. He realized with crushing clarity that he had completely failed. But what troubled him even more was the undeniable truth that Marcus had just shown him. True power and strength didn't come from threats or violence, but from self-control and calmness in the face of every challenge. As Marcus's figure disappeared down the narrow path leading away from the sports field, a heavy silence immediately enveloped the space where Austin was kneeling on the ground. In front of the astonished and wary eyes of his closest friends, Zach and Luke, the one who had always been seen as the ruler of Brooklyn High, now sat dazed, his gaze lost, staring into the empty air in disbelief. Austin had never experienced a moment more terrifying and humiliating than this. All the arrogance, confidence, and power he had built over the years now seemed to crumble in an instant, shattered by Marcus. He could feel the despair tightening around his mind, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't just the sting of failure, but the painful realization that he had completely lost control. Something he had always believed was impossible for him. Just then, Marcus paused as if thinking something over, then slowly turned back toward Austin. His eyes remained calm as usual, but now they were colder, sharper, and more powerful than ever before. He walked toward Austin, gently bent down, and whispered into his ear in a voice so soft yet cold that it made Austin shiver. "Austin, from this moment on, you will never control me again. All the power you think you have, it's just an illusion. I hope you understand that." Each word Marcus spoke felt like a sharp knife, piercing straight into Austin's mind and self-esteem, causing him the deepest pain. Austin couldn't speak a word, his mouth dry, his eyes filled with panic. He could no longer resist the overwhelming psychological strength Marcus had just demonstrated. As Marcus slowly stood up and began to walk away again, Austin remained frozen as if turned to stone, the chilling whisper still echoing in his mind, each word feeling colder and more cutting, shattering the arrogant facade he had worked so hard to build over the years. The students, who had begun to gather from afar, witnessing the entire scene, stood silent, no one daring to say a word. They had never seen Austin reduced to such a state of complete collapse before. Zach and Luke, the friends who had always stood by Austin, were now standing still, their eyes filled with hesitation and confusion. Zach, the older brother who had always been strong and cold, was for the first time at a loss for what to do or say in the face of his younger brother's plight. Luke, who typically found enjoyment in conflicts, now simply lowered his gaze to the ground, unable to meet Austin's bewildered face. Austin slowly looked up, his eyes filled with despair, confusion, but above all with the clear realization that he had lost all the power he had once prided himself on. The gazes directed at him from all sides made him feel as if he were standing on the edge of a dark abyss he had never imagined. The painful truth began to sink into Austin's consciousness. He had always believed that he controlled everything and everyone, but now he saw that it had all been a fragile illusion. Marcus, the one he had once looked down on the most, had now convincingly proven that true power didn't come from bullying or threatening others. It came from the ability to control oneself with calmness in any situation. For the first time in his life, Austin felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness take over his mind. He realized that from this moment on, no one at Brooklyn High would fear him the way they once did. The shadow of power he had once held was now nothing more than broken shards falling apart right in front of him. Austin pushed himself off the ground, struggling to stand, but his legs trembled. Unable to support the weight of his own body, he had to lean on Zach's shoulder, who reluctantly helped him. His eyes still filled with shock from what had just transpired. "Let's go, Austin," Zach whispered, his voice trembling strangely. "It's over here." Austin didn't respond. He simply nodded quietly, allowing Zach and Luke to help him walk away, step by painful step, out of the school grounds. He didn't dare look up, didn't dare face anyone's gaze anymore, because he knew that everyone had witnessed the worst moment of his life. As they walked, Austin realized that he had lost the most important thing to him, the respect and trust of everyone around him. Everything he had built through fear and threats had now completely evaporated because of one person, Marcus Johnson. Austin knew that from this moment on he had no control over anything anymore. Marcus had been right. He could never control others the way he had thought was most effective. Power could not be built on coercion, because in the end, it would only lead to painful destruction. Austin walked in silence, his heart filled with despair and loneliness, as he finally understood that his downfall wasn't caused by the strength of violence, but by Marcus's remarkable self-control and composure. That was the most painful lesson, but also the most important one Austin had ever learned in his life. From the moment Austin stumbled away, reluctantly supported by Zach and Luke, he immediately felt a bitter realization that he had never imagined would happen to him: total isolation. In just one afternoon, all the power and reputation he had worked so hard to build over the years at Brooklyn High had evaporated. The days that followed became the worst of Austin Mitchell's life. Each time he walked through the school doors, the coldness and silence from the crowd hit him like an invisible sentence. The friends who had always surrounded him, those who had once revered him and eagerly followed his every command, now turned their backs, cold and indifferent, even avoiding him as if he were something to be feared. In the school cafeteria, where Austin used to sit at the center of attention, with laughter ringing around him, now felt colder and lonelier than ever before. No one wanted to sit next to him anymore. Zach and Luke, though still a bit reluctant, started to distance themselves more clearly, as if afraid that Austin's failure would drag them down with him. The alienation from his closest friends hurt more than the mockery from others. Austin suddenly realized that the people he had trusted and considered his most loyal allies weren't really on his side. They only cared about their own power and interests. When he lost his position of power, they quickly found their way out. Even Brian and Cole, the two who had always been by his side, ready to carry out any bullying scheme he devised, now turned their backs openly. Brian avoided Austin's gaze whenever he passed by, while Cole openly displayed his dissatisfaction and distaste, making it clear he no longer wanted anything to do with him. For Austin, the feeling of betrayal and loneliness was like a deep wound, one that would be hard to heal. But what pained Austin even more was Marcus's behavior after that clear victory. Austin had expected Marcus to seize the opportunity to take his position of power at Brooklyn High, something anyone else in that situation would have done. But Marcus didn't do that. On the contrary, Marcus maintained his calm and discreet demeanor, showing no sign of gloating or trying to leverage his victory to rise higher in everyone's eyes. Marcus even rejected all the praise and attempts to get closer from those who wanted to take advantage of the moment. All Marcus wanted was peace and equality for himself and everyone around him in the school. This made Austin feel even more ashamed and bitter. Not only had he failed physically and mentally to Marcus, but he also had to face the painful truth that Marcus, the very person he had despised and bullied, was the one who truly understood the meaning of power and respect. Each time Marcus quietly walked down the school hallway, always calm and courteous to everyone around him, Austin felt more and more the distance between them. Not in terms of power or reputation, but in terms of character and maturity. Marcus's calmness and composure were things Austin had never been able to achieve, no matter how hard he tried. Not long after, the gossip about Austin's failure began to spread throughout the school, but this time, it wasn't filled with awe or fear. It was full of sarcasm and mockery. Austin, who once silenced everyone with his gaze and threatening attitude, was now the subject of casual and unrestrained conversation among the students. In his most desperate moments, Austin would sit alone at the end of the hallway, his head lowered, staring at his empty hands, deeply aware that power based on fear is never sustainable. He had realized that true respect couldn't be forced. It could only be built on understanding, equality, and mutual self-respect. Things he had never known before. Austin never imagined he would have to learn such a harsh lesson. The days that followed, he lived in complete isolation, trying to avoid the gazes of those around him, wondering if there would ever be an opportunity to start over. But deep inside, Austin knew he could never regain his former position, not because of Marcus, but because he had destroyed everything he once believed was eternal. Meanwhile, Marcus continued living his normal life, never using the opportunity to replace Austin. He always tried to avoid conflict or dispute, simply hoping for peace for himself and everyone around him. Marcus had proven an important lesson to the entire school. Power isn't based on threats. It's based on courage, restraint, and calmness, which truly defines the strength of a person. And so Austin felt more clearly the consequences of his failure. He had lost everything he once owned, not just his power, reputation, but also the respect and trust of those around him. The moment he collapsed, before Marcus didn't just mark the end of his reign at Brooklyn High, but also the beginning of a profound lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. A lesson about true power and about the choice of what kind of person he would become. It was only then that Austin truly understood. The biggest consequence of his failure wasn't losing his top position, but the bitter truth that he had lost himself in the process of pursuing that false power. From the moment Marcus disappeared down the narrow path leading away from the sports field, a heavy silence fell over the space where Austin remained kneeling on the ground. In the astonished and weary eyes of his closest friends, Zach and Luke, the once feared ruler of Brooklyn High, now sat motionless, his gaze lost and filled with disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Austin had never experienced a moment more terrifying and humiliating than this. All the arrogance, confidence, and power he had built over the years seemed to vanish in an instant, shattered by Marcus. He could feel despair tightening around his mind, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't just the sting of defeat, it was the painful realization that he had completely lost control, something he had always believed would never happen to him. Just then, Marcus stopped as though considering something, then slowly turned back toward Austin. His eyes remained as calm as ever, but now they were colder, more decisive, and filled with a power that Austin hadn't seen before. He walked over to Austin, gently lowered himself and whispered into his ear in a voice so quiet but chilling that it made Austin shiver. "Austin, from this moment on, you will never control me again. All the power you think you have, it's just an illusion. I hope you understand that." Each word Marcus spoke was like a sharp knife, cutting straight into Austin's mind and self-esteem, causing him immense pain. Austin couldn't say a word. His mouth was dry, his eyes filled with panic. He no longer had any resistance left against the overwhelming psychological strength Marcus had just demonstrated. As Marcus slowly stood up and began walking away again, Austin remained frozen like a statue. The chilling whisper still echoed in his mind, each word feeling colder and more piercing, shattering the arrogant facade he had spent years building. The students who had begun to gather from afar, witnessing the entire scene, stood silent, no one daring to speak. They had never seen Austin reduced to such a state of complete collapse. Zach and Luke, the friends who had always been by Austin's side, now stood still, their eyes filled with hesitation and confusion. Zach, the older brother who had always been strong and cold, was for the first time at a loss for what to do or say in the face of his younger brother's situation. Luke, who typically found pleasure in conflicts, now simply lowered his gaze to the ground, unable to meet Austin's dazed face. Austin slowly looked up, his eyes filled with despair and confusion. But more than that, with the clear realization that he had lost all the power he once prided himself on. The eyes of the crowd staring at him from all sides made him feel as if he were standing on the edge of a dark abyss he had never imagined. The painful truth began to sink into Austin's mind. He had always believed that he controlled everything and everyone, but now he saw that it had all been a fragile illusion. Marcus, the one he had once looked down on the most, had now convincingly proven that true power didn't come from bullying or threatening others. It came from the ability to control oneself with calmness in any situation. For the first time in his life, Austin felt a crushing sense of helplessness. He realized that from this moment on, no one at Brooklyn High would fear him the way they once did. The shadow of power he had once held was now nothing more than broken shards, falling apart right in front of him. Austin pushed himself off the ground, struggling to stand, but his legs trembled, unable to support the weight of his own body. He had to lean on Zach's shoulder, who reluctantly helped him, his eyes still filled with shock from what had just happened. "Let's go, Austin," Zach whispered, his voice trembling strangely. "It's over here." Austin didn't respond. He simply nodded quietly, allowing Zach and Luke to help him walk away, step by painful step, out of the school grounds. He didn't dare look up, didn't dare face anyone's gaze anymore, because he knew that everyone had witnessed the worst moment of his life. As they walked, Austin realized that he had lost the most important thing to him, the respect and trust of everyone around him. Everything he had built through fear and threats had now completely evaporated because of one person, Marcus Johnson. Austin knew that from this moment on he had no control over anything anymore. Marcus had been right. He could never control others the way he had thought was most effective. Power could not be built on coercion, because in the end, it would only lead to painful destruction. Austin walked in silence, his heart filled with despair and loneliness. As he finally understood that his downfall wasn't caused by the strength of violence, but by Marcus's remarkable self-control and composure. That was the most painful lesson, but also the most important one Austin had ever learned in his life. After the moment Marcus stood up and declared that the battle was over, the atmosphere in the Brooklyn High cafeteria changed forever. Marcus's act of forgiveness was not just a beautiful gesture, but sparked a quiet yet profound wave within every student. What Marcus did that day was not about asserting power, not a victory in the traditional sense, but a rare and humane choice that the school had never witnessed before. The following days brought an unusual calm to Brooklyn High. Gone were the cruel whispers in the hallway corners. Gone were the cold, judgmental stares directed at the new students or those who were vulnerable. Instead, there were gentle, sincere conversations, eyes meeting with empathy and deeper understanding. All these changes stemmed from Marcus's humble actions and demeanor, someone who had just taught the entire school the most important lesson about true power, the power of compassion and mutual respect. Austin, who had once been the symbol of power and control at Brooklyn High, had now become a living example of the failure of a life built on fear and intimidation. But after that day, the way the students saw Austin began to change. They no longer just saw him as a loser. They began to view him as someone struggling with himself, someone trying to find his way back to the respect and dignity he had lost. Austin gradually stopped being someone to avoid and instead became a reminder of the consequences of misunderstanding true power. Marcus, while maintaining his humble and discreet attitude, was gradually being noticed and respected more by everyone. He had never tried to stand out, but it was his calm demeanor and courage that naturally made him a new symbol of Brooklyn High. Marcus didn't need to use force or threats, nor did he need to speak loudly to make himself known. His very calmness, self-control, and fair approach naturally made him stand out, earning the respect of those around him. Slowly, the students who had once sided with Austin or had been intimidated by him began to reconsider the true meaning of power and respect. They realized that true strength wasn't about who could make others fear them more, but about the ability to control oneself and treat others with fairness and understanding. Marcus had clearly demonstrated this through his actions, not just once, but several times throughout his time at the school. The teachers and the school administration at Brooklyn High also quickly recognized the positive changes in the school environment. The tension that had once simmered beneath the surface among the students began to dissipate, replaced by an atmosphere of respect and cooperation. Even the teachers who had witnessed countless confrontations and conflicts had to admit that Marcus had brought something they had always tried to teach, but never truly succeeded in doing a living, convincing lesson about maturity, compassion, and justice. With the shift in the students' mindset and behavior, Brooklyn High had entered a new chapter, one where every individual was treated with true respect and fairness. This didn't mean that all conflicts or disagreements disappeared completely, but now every student knew they had the right to be heard and treated equally. And all of this stemmed from one small but significant action by Marcus. A new student who had simply wanted a peaceful school year, but had unintentionally led the entire school to a positive change. Meanwhile, Austin continued his journey to find himself. He no longer tried to regain the power or position he once held. Instead, he made a daily effort to change his attitude and thinking. Austin realized he couldn't change the past, but he could change how people saw him in the future. Instead of avoiding Marcus, Austin gradually learned to look at him with genuine respect. He could no longer deny that Marcus had given him the most profound lesson he had ever learned about respect, dignity, and the true strength of forgiveness. And as Marcus quietly walked through the school hallway, he was met with admiring yet friendly gazes. For Marcus, this wasn't a personal victory, but a victory for everyone. What he had always aimed for wasn't a position of power, but simply a space where everyone could live with dignity and equality. Brooklyn High was no longer the domain of Austin, Zach, or anyone who had tried to dominate with imposed power. Instead, it had become a place where each individual learned that true power is the ability to master oneself, to respect, and to listen to others. This was the most valuable lesson Marcus had brought to the school, and it marked the greatest turning point in the history of the school. Now every student at Brooklyn High understood an important truth. Marcus was not just a new student, but had become a true symbol of courage, self-control, and justice. Values that from now on, the entire school would strive to follow. Marcus had never truly felt joy seeing Austin suffer from the pain of isolation and rejection. Every time he saw Austin sitting quietly by himself in the cafeteria, his eyes dull and lifeless, Marcus felt a genuine sympathy. But at the same time, Marcus understood that Austin was paying the price for the wrong decisions he had made, decisions that had pushed him into the state of isolation he was in now. Marcus had experienced similar feelings at his old school, so he knew the pain of losing the respect of those around him. However, unlike Austin, Marcus had chosen to learn and grow from his mistakes. What relieved Marcus was that Austin was beginning to show signs of awakening and a clearer understanding of the true value of respect. In the days that followed, Marcus didn't change how he treated Austin. Every time they accidentally crossed paths in the hallway, Marcus still greeted him with a gentle but sincere nod. It wasn't because he wanted to show superiority or pity Austin, but simply because Marcus understood that the only way to overcome hatred and past mistakes was to face them honestly and calmly. This small but meaningful action from Marcus gradually made Austin feel less tense when he encountered him. At first, Austin always avoided Marcus's gaze, but over time he had gained enough courage to look Marcus in the eye. Not with hostility, but with hesitation and a touch of regret. Austin began to realize that Marcus didn't want revenge on him. He just wanted Austin to understand the consequences of his own thoughtless actions. One peaceful afternoon, as Brooklyn High was about to wrap up another long day of classes, Marcus stood quietly by the large window in the hallway, looking out at the sky gradually turning a light orange. He thought a lot about everything that had just happened, about the long road he had walked to be where he was now. Marcus knew that without the education and strict lessons from his father, he might not have been able to face these challenges with the courage and self-control he had. At that moment, Austin stepped up from behind, hesitant and reluctant. Finally, he stopped, standing next to Marcus, his eyes gazing off into the distance, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "Marcus, I'd like to talk for a moment if you don't mind." Marcus turned to look at Austin, offering a gentle smile and nodding. "Of course, Austin." Austin took a deep breath, his eyes showing clear signs of embarrassment, but sincerity as he continued. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day. I realize now that I was wrong. Very wrong. I always thought that power meant controlling others, making them fear you. but I was completely mistaken. Austin paused as if searching for the right words to express how he felt, then continued. I want you to know that no matter how much I suffer or endure, I understand it's because of my own actions. I don't blame you, Marcus. I only blame myself for being so blind and selfish. Marcus listened quietly, sensing the genuine sincerity in Austin's words. He smiled softly and placed a friendly hand on Austin's shoulder. I'm glad to hear you say that, Austin. I never wanted to see you suffer or lose everything you had. But sometimes we need to pay a price to recognize the true values in life. Marcus looked directly into Austin's eyes, his voice firm but warm. I believe that true power doesn't come from bullying or forcing others to submit. True power lies in the ability to control oneself, to maintain self-respect in all circumstances, and to face injustice with calmness and resolve. Austin remained silent, his eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. I understand now, Marcus. Thank you for teaching me the most important lesson of my life. I know I can't fix my mistakes right away, but I will try. Marcus nodded sincerely. I believe in you, Austin. Everyone has the right to choose their own path, and I truly hope you choose a better one in the future. The two of them stood silently for a moment, both looking out the window at the vast sky outside. Brooklyn High was no longer just a place where students came to learn academics. It had become a place where they learned profound lessons about life, courage, self-control, and the true meaning of power. Marcus knew that his journey at Brooklyn High wasn't just about being the new student who faced bullies. It was a journey full of meaning about maturity and compassion. The message he sent to everyone at the school was clearer than ever. True power doesn't come from control or oppression, but from respecting oneself and others around you. Marcus looked at Austin one last time, offering him a gentle, encouraging smile. He understood that despite going through many painful trials, they had both grown so much from their mistakes and challenges. And that was the true value Marcus wanted to pass on to everyone. That change always starts with oneself. And the greatest power lies in the ability to master oneself in the face of all of life's challenges. The story of Marcus and Austin at Brooklyn High wasn't just about overcoming bullying, but it was also a profound journey about finding the true value of power, courage, and self-control. Through Marcus, we realize that true power doesn't lie in imposing, forcing, or controlling others. It lies in the ability to master oneself, maintain self-respect, and calmly face every challenge life brings. What about you? If you were in Marcus's shoes, how would you choose to face the situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you find this story meaningful, please share it with your friends to spread this positive message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you for always being with us.